Welcome back to Everyday Economics, a podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, president of 501c3 nonprofit Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can check out all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. To support podcasts such as Everyday Economics, please make your tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We were recording this episode on Thursday, January 12th, and joining me as always is my partner, Dr. Orphe Divounguy. Is a PhD economist and one heck of a nice guy. Orphe, I want to talk about the real estate market. Could you please tell me what is going on in terms of home values in Florida outperforming like everybody consistently? So we've had some bubble up in this period of economic instability. So we could go back like a year, right? And think about things in the span of the past year. You had markets. Pittsburgh went bananas. Even where I live in suburban Chicago, prices went bananas. And then they've come back down. Florida, it looks like it just keeps going up right now. How are they doing this?
That's a good question. I mean, there's something in the water in Florida. I say that because you mentioned house prices in Florida. I honestly really think it's got to be all about migration. It's got to be all about population.
As you wrote in LinkedIn, I'll give you credit. I mean, you wrote a post on LinkedIn this past week that the typical U.S. home value rose about 8% in 2022, that's been terrific. I mean, in terms of for us and where I live, that's like astronomical. That's like a throwback to a time that we've forgotten. But in Florida, in select markets like Tampa, up 16.4%, Orlando up 15.4%. Jacksonville up 14%, and Miami above all of them at 19.7%. That is just wow.
I know. In a year where we had a record deterioration of housing affordability due to the doubling of mortgage rates, that pushed potential home buyers and potential sellers to the sidelines. And I should say more potential home buyers than sellers to the sidelines. We started to see price growth decline, and then even prices decline in some markets at the end of the summer. And so we're starting to see price growth declining everywhere. We're starting house prices decline in some markets, in the hottest markets that were in the West, the markets that saw rapid increases during the pandemic, except Florida. Price in Florida markets, they haven't lost their momentum. Miami up 19.7% year over year. Tampa 16% year over year. Orlando 15% year over year. Jacksonville, Florida up 14% year over year. What is going on? Why is it that Florida house prices are not coming down?
So if I'm a retiree or I'm a remote worker or I have flexibility in where I can live in the country or, whatever the case is, there's a lot of appealing things about Florida. The weather's very nice. And the summers are kind of tough, but you know what? You don't have to shovel sunshine. No state income tax, right? So there's a lot to love there.
The determinants of house prices include population, income, wealth, interest rates on the demand side, right? So if we have more people moving into area, people with more income grows faster, wealth grows, right? Interest rates, all those factors stimulate demand. Now look at Florida, largest increase in population growth in 2022. Income for most Americans is growing at a slower pace, not keeping up with inflation. Stock market wealth declined in the past year. Interest rates are increased like crazy in the past year. All of those demand factors, except population for Florida, would indicate prices would fall, right? Demand would pull down prices. So, we need to look at the supply side. You look at the supply side. Man-made constraints to building, Florida doesn't have a lot of those. However, Florida has geographical constraints to bring you. So, they have a lot of swamps, water everywhere.
A lot of unbuildable spots in Florida, but
exactly.
Geographically, it's a big state. It's not a small state. It's a big state.
Exactly. And then you add the climate risk. And we talked about that. The fact that climate destruction actually destroys the housing stock, which actually pushes prices up. So on the demand side, only population is there to support Florida prices. On the supply side, there's a lot of factors that will keep prices elevated in Florida because, of course, they can't build as much. And so it's got to be population, right? It's got to be those two factors that are causing prices in Florida to remain elevated. And so Florida is amazing. You got last year, clear winner, 1.9% increase in population compared to just 0.4% for the country as a whole, right? Roughly 319,000 Americans left their home states for the state of Florida in 2022. And I think that's the Florida miracle. And then you're going to ask me, because I know you'll probably follow up with, but why the heck are Americans moving there? Some people might say the weather. Here's what my theory is, and there's some really good research to support this. Economic freedom. There's research that shows that for a 10% increase in economic freedom, and how is economic freedom measured? Some of my good friends north of the border create this thing called the Economic Freedom of North America Index, and an increase in economic freedom actually causes net migration from origin to destination to increase, right? So if the destination state or metro area has more economic freedom, I'll give you some numbers here, 10% more economic freedom than the state of origin, the destination state is expected to get roughly 27.4% increase in net migration from that state or metropolitan area of origin. And so it's there. There's a ton of research on this. I think that governance matters. And people go where they can enjoy better standards of living, and those places tend to have more economic freedom. You look at the jobs data, and you see that basically states that had fewer restrictions during the pandemic had a much quicker economic recovery. Job growth went crazy. Housing market went absolutely through the roof. And so, it's the same story. I think that's the Florida secret.
For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other quality podcasts at americastalking.com.